Welcome, everyone. I can see a few people are joining us. We'll get started in a moment. For those who don't know me, my name is James Cole. I'm course leader for BA Creative Writing here at AUB. And we've got plenty of time for anyone to ask their questions for Cheryl. So please, if you've got a question, please use the Q&A tab. Hopefully you can see that at the bottom. And we'll try and get through as many of those questions as possible. If you can use the Q&A tab rather than the chat function, that would be really helpful. And that will help us field all of those questions. So we'll begin in a moment. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Really excited. I think we'll get started now. Welcome, Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on Parma. Just to begin, absolutely gorgeous film. So beautiful and heartbreaking, but so positive as well. And yeah, I think it'll be great to hear more about Parma at some point. I just wanted to start really just hearing about your journey into screenwriting. How did it start? How did you enter that industry?
Sure. Well, I had graduated college and I was very athletically inclined. Growing up, I was always involved in sports. I played a sport around the year, played sports in university, got out, worked for a sports agent, and worked for a sports apparel company. And quite honestly, I was bored and slightly depressed, and I was just bored. And I've always loved movies. I was always a creative kid. It just never clicked that that was something I could do until I realized I had an idea for a movie. And again, I've always loved movies, loved going to the cinema, and I had an idea for a movie. And I'm like, okay, how do I write this into a movie? And I bought books and I read scripts, and I'm like, okay, this is how you do it. And I just sat down. It was actually a New Year's Eve, and I'm like, I'm not going out. I just want to write. And I started writing. It was like a thriller, as a drama thriller. It was about a husband who hires a younger man to test his wife's faithfulness. And I just started writing it and I loved it. I was just like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. And I was living with my parents in New Jersey. I'm from the States. And once I realized this is what I wanted to do for a living, I was like, okay, the movie industry is out in California, but then also I lived close to New York City. So I'm like, let me move to New York City. And I got a job at a film company. And I just kept writing. I just kept writing. And I would cold call people. Will you read my script? Will you read my script? And finally got someone to read my script. And it was an agent. He didn't take me on, but his assistant moved to a production company. And one day my phone rang and he's like, I really loved your script. We'd like to option it. And optioning it is kind of like they give you a little bit of money to hold on to it, to own it for a certain amount of time. And then they either have to outright purchase the screenplay or give it back. And that was the first time I got paid. And I was like, oh my God, like, wait, I can it wasn't like a big check, but I'm like, someone actually gave me money for my writing, and just continued on with writing.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That sounds really exciting. And would you say with screenwriting, is it really important that you've got that agent?
Well, here's the thing. I didn't get it for the longest time. I actually did not have a manager or an agent. And my scripts, my screenplays were getting read by, it was like a friend of a friend. Like someone would read my script and they were like, wow, this is really good. And then they'd give it to someone. And for a while, actually, I'm sorry, I did get a manager at one point because someone read one of my screenplays and they took me on as a client. And it didn't really do anything for my career. And quite honestly, the first screenplay of mine that got made into a film wasn't through a manager, wasn't through an agent. It was a guy in New York City who ran a production company, and he knew a producer that was looking to make a certain film, and he told them about me, and they read my work, and then I pitched them my take and they hired me. And also my second film that got made, it was called Hunting Season. It was another thriller. The first one was a comedy, but the second one, that's another story. I mostly write dramas, but the second one, it was similar. It wasn't through a manager or an agent. And I had a manager at the time, but it was through someone who had read me and gave it to someone else, a producer. And one day my phone rings and he's like, I want to buy your script and make it into a film. Palmer was different. Palmer, everything that happened with that was I mean, my script had won some awards and I had, God, that's another long story, but I had a set of managers at one point with Palmer, and they sent it to one producer who picked it up, had it for like a year and a half, and nothing happened. And then it was just sitting. And I realized like I needed new management. It was just time for me to move on, like dating, like nothing was happening. The script was sitting. And then I went on to another manager and he's like, why is the screenplay sitting? Why is Palmer sitting? And he sent it out all over Hollywood, all over Los Angeles. It ended up getting on the Blacklist, which is a prestigious honor. It's like the best unproduced screenplays. And then it got picked up by another producer. And then, I mean, it was a journey. And then eventually Fisher Stevens, who directed it, read it. And he's like, I want to direct this. And so that's a whole other journey. And I could keep talking about that if you want me to, but, you know, I've had the manager I have now, I absolutely love. I love and writing assignments that I've gotten and work that I've been doing. I mean, he's a hardworking individual. So I think it's a good, he and I are a good partnership.
Brilliant. I imagine that's quite rare to have that partnership, and
yeah,
and really helpful, I imagine, you know, in the creative process.
Yeah. I mean, you know, in the beginning of my career, it was just people reading me and liking my writing and relationships but now it's more, you know, I have an agent and I have a manager, and things that are coming my way are because of, you know, people see Palmer or they've read something else I've written, and maybe they think I'd be a good fit for the project that they're looking for a writer on. But it's also because I have a manager and an agent who also work hard, and they see what's out there, and if I'm a good fit for it, or if there's something that I like, a book, they'll like go after it for me.
Brilliant. And you know, speaking of that journey, we've got a question here. Has your voice as a writer changed over time, you know, in that journey?
Great question. I think it's fair to say that Palmer is my most, as far as my voice. Like I wrote another script. Then I wrote it as a book. It's called Girl on Point. And I think Girl on Point and Palmer are my two, those are pieces of my writing that I have been the most vulnerable and the most honest. And those are the two scripts that people have gravitated towards the most. So I think my voice is, I am someone, like, if you meet me, I'm okay with being vulnerable. I'm okay with being honest. Like if I'm not having a great day, I'm not like, hey, things are great. I'm just, you know, I'm not a sad sack, but I don't pretend to be anything that I'm not. And I'm just very honest, and I'm very vulnerable. And I think that's really my voice. And what goes on the page with Palmer was the vulnerability and the honesty and the humbleness of these characters. Same as with this other script of mine that I wrote as a book. So.
And that really does shine through, that vulnerability, that honesty,
Yeah.
just through all of those incredible characters that you've created. How do you go about picking those emotional moments? You know, because there are so many within there that just speak volumes, and I'm sure so many different people can relate to. How do you go about picking those emotional moments specifically?
Yeah, good question. Has everyone seen Palmer, or does it matter if I give something away?
I should have at the beginning said a spoiler alert, but yeah, if you haven't
Well,
watched it, close your ears now.
well, let's try to say something without giving something away. I mean, I knew when I wrote Palmer, I knew where I was going. I knew that this little boy would end up with this man, and that this man wanted nothing, initially would want nothing to do with this kid. So I knew when I wrote Palmer that, and I've met the type and I can relate to the type. And I was that type for years of my life where I just was not comfortable in my skin. And it took years before I was comfortable with who I am in my skin. So I could relate to Palmer in that there were things that he did that he regretted. There were judgments about him. And I can relate to, like, just, love me, but stay away from me. And with Sam, I just have always felt I had I have a nephew, and there's just such an age from like 5 to 8 where they're just so innocent, or even 4 to 8, like they're just innocent little beings. They just love you unconditionally. And I knew that about Sam, that he was just a little boy that just loved unconditionally. It's like a dog, and they can sense good, and with Sam and Palmer, like for me, Palmer was always a good man who did some things that weren't good. And so the emotions with the two of them, I just always knew that Sam was someone who was comfortable in his skin and Palmer wasn't. And so, there was something in the script that I had written, and it stayed in there for a while. And it was Palmer sits at the bar, he's alone, and he feels every bit of that. And I wrote that because for me, I could relate to moments in my life. Like I've been in parties where I've been surrounded by friends or whatever, and for whatever reason, I just felt completely alone. And it's a weird experience. It's a weird feeling. And I'll just say, like, I've had my own issues with alcohol, and that was one of them. And so I knew this character Palmer. And as far as Shelley and her emotional journey, I've known people that are drug addicts and that have succeeded in getting clean, and I've known people that have not succeeded in getting clean. And I know the struggles there. And Juno Temple was so amazing. There was something she added in the trailer scene when Palmer comes in and tries to, buy her off for the kid. And she goes, "Don't look at me, don't look at me." And I thought that was so brilliant, because a lot of, and drug addicts or people that are struggling with drug abuse, it's like they've gotten looks from people that it's just like, "You're just so disappointing. You're disappointing me again." And she did that. And she threw that in. And I just thought it was so brilliant because it was so real. So emotionally, I had these characters, like I had their numbers and how they felt. And when I write, I kind of go into these characters, like I'm like feeling this character, I'm feeling that character. So I think that's why it came across as so authentic.
And I think that's from a lot of the responses we're seeing, online, and from those who've watched it. And we spoke earlier, just a minute ago, about that connection that people are finding with this. That must be so exciting as a writer to have that.
It's beautiful. I mean, honestly, that's what makes it so worthwhile and gratifying, because I wrote this as a spec. No one paid me to write it. It was an original idea that I felt called to write. I felt inspired. I feel like it was a God, and this isn't a religious statement, but I just felt like it was a very God inspired, like a spiritual experience to write this. And it kind of flowed out of me, and it came from different parts of my life. And so to see the reaction from people and things, the positive comments that are being said, and the people relating to it at the levels in which they are, or how it's affecting them. I mean, there's a woman that's she's making t-shirts with things that Sam says, and like a mug. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's like so amazing and so gratifying, because especially because this film took 10 years to get made. So to see that, I mean, like, honestly, I feel so blessed. It's so gratifying. And I don't have, I mean, I'm saying the same thing, but to see, someone said to me the other day, she's like, how do you feel? Like your words are up on a screen, like, Justin Timberlake saying your words and Ryder, and all this. And I'm like, trust me, I was there on set when we were filming and I had many moments like, wow, like he really is Palmer. And like, how amazing is this? And even now to see people's reaction and what they're saying about the film is, I feel like a proud parent with it.
It's amazing. And with that, being on set, is that quite common for a writer? I know you were producer as well, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, not at all. And
not,
that
yeah.
is, I mean, sometimes the writer, like I have friends that are writers and they'll go to set for a little bit of time. But I was involved in everything. And that's because of Fisher Stevens, the director, and the producers that just felt, uh, mainly Fisher, that this is collaborative and he wanted me involved and he wanted me there. And even with the casting, like he introduced me to all the casting people, like I was always involved. And to have a input with it. And even when we were on set, like sometimes things would have to be changed like that. And it really was a low budget. Like we shot this in 25 days for like $5-6 million. And there were things like the bowling scene. Originally, that wasn't a bowling scene. Originally, I had that written as this big fair with all these games and animals, and the budget was like, Fisher's like, we got to make it a small fair, and then it became like this sad little fair. And then while they were location scouting, they came across a bowling alley, and he's like, we're going to change it to a bowling scene. I'm like, perfect, because really the point of the scene was bonding. So it didn't matter where it took place. It just mattered that these three characters were coming together like a family and having fun. I actually really like the bowling alley scene. But yeah, I mean, I was there from beginning to end, and that's because of the director, Fisher Stevens. Yeah.
I think, yeah, that bowling alley scene, and I think so many of those scenes like that, where it is just the three of them or two of them, where it's just Palmer and Sam, I think just really are the spine of this story. The one that really spoke to me was the scene in the bar where there is it root beer floats.
Yeah.
We don't have those over here. I think that's what they're called.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they're talking about lying, and such a huge moment for both characters, I felt, but done in such an understated way that really spoke to me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of my favorite scenes, and it was an important scene because it's a moment where Palmer, he is becoming, every things that he's done in the past that he regrets, he's able to use that to teach a little boy or help a little boy who, because his mom didn't have money, he was stealing from the next door neighbor because the little girl had a snow globe that he wanted, he took. And I love that scene, and I love Justin and Ryder in it. It's one of my favorite scenes. Yeah.
Do you often, and this is one of the questions I think links to something you've already said, but do you often see yourself in the characters, or how do you write other characters that you might not see yourself in, or equally people that you say you've met other people that then might inform these characters? Is that, was that just Palmer, do you think, or is this part of your process?
No, I'm trying to think. Like it depends. I can't see. I don't. There's not. I can't. I can relate more to Palmer. I don't really relate to Shelley. I don't really relate to Vivian. But Palmer was someone, and I had met men who had spent time in prison and who had gotten out of prison and turned their lives around. And they were so vulnerable with me and things that they spoke about. Like these were men that that they were probably more afraid of me than I was of them. And when I got to know them and talk to them emotionally, I'm like, God, these are interesting men, and these are soft men and sensitive men. And these are men who spent time in prison for long periods of time. So there were things about Palmer that I could definitely relate to. And that was like being uncomfortable in my skin, having shame. And because Sam isn't a kid who has shame. And as a little child, I'm gay, and I was the little girl who was playing with all these boy toys. Like I played with trucks and gun. I played in the dirt, and don't put me in a dress because I would scream. Like I was, I guess you could say, a tomboy, but I didn't realize, I just was doing what was comfortable for me. But as I got older, the outside world at that time was like, no, 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 you're a girl. Like I had someone tell me, it's like, Cheryl, do you know you're a girl? Girls don't play in the dirt. And I remember I was 8 years old and I felt so much shame because I was like, I didn't understand. Because I'm like, well, I'm a girl and I like playing in the dirt. And it wasn't until I got older that I'm like, oh, I realized I'm gay. And so I started hiding things about myself. And it was important for me that Sam was not like that. He was unapologetic. He had no shame, and nor should he. And he was just doing what made him happy. But Palmer had shame for things that he had done. And so I could relate to him. And there's other characters. I've written a script with gang members or girl gang members. And I'd be asked, hey, were you ever in a gang? Because I'm like, nope, I was an athlete, but I was never in a gang. But, I've met gang members. But I don't know. I just kind of tap into how I see this person. And it's like family members, I have one family member who's like this and another one who's like that. And so I just get their voices in my head. And it's like, okay, what this one would say, this one wouldn't. It's like friends. Like we know, like this friend would do this thing, and this friend wouldn't do this thing, or we know we could go to with a problem with this brand and not with this friend. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a really good analogy. So with Sam's character, obviously there are other characters who have a problem with him. They don't like the way he's acting, and it's horrific what they put him through. Did you get anything like that in terms of when you were pitching the story, when you were trying to sell the story? Was there any backlash against the kind of themes or topics?
Never. And I think because everything is so subtle, like for me, it was important. Like, I'm not someone, like, if I see a movie and there's messages or themes, like, I like to come to my own conclusion. I don't like anything like forced down my throat. And I felt like, I think what people mostly took away when they read the script was it was about what it felt like to be a parent, and dealing with what comes with being a parent, or shame or second chances. So I think there were themes in there that people really, really spoke to them. And it's interesting because a lot of, I had a lot of young dads, like they had just had their first child. And even Justin, he's got 2 kids now. And I think it spoke to him too, because he had just become a parent. So I think you start to see things a little bit in a different light. I mean, I'm not a parent, but I was a kid, and so I had certain views and feelings. But the thing that I think most people, when they read the script, they're like, wow, it's going to be tough. This kid is in the movie for the majority of the movie. That's what scared people, is because it's co-starred a 7-year-old. And that just never bothered me. I'm just like, we'll find the kid. We'll find the kid. So, yeah.
And you did. It's just
Yeah.
amazing. Ryder Allen,
Amazing.
absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And kind of, I guess, linked to that in a way is, has being a woman affected your career at all? Is it harder to be a female screenwriter in Hollywood? That's a question from Lyra there.
I think as a writer, it really doesn't. Look, maybe if I worked in TV, it would be different, but I work in film, and I can't say, people that read me, it really is what's on the page. And like when I read people, when I read a script, it doesn't matter if it's written, like if I read a feature script, it doesn't matter if it's a male or a female. What matters is what's on the page. And there might be certain sensibilities that a female has and that a male has. And I think I'm a female that writes, like, I'm not, how do I say it? I'm not like a Sex in the City type of girl or like a Pitch Perfect. That's not me. I'm more like, give me Hurt Locker, give me, what's movies like Goodfellas, or like give me like I just don't typically like romantic comedies. I mean, I loved Bridesmaids, and every once in a while there's a romantic comedy that comes out, but I don't know if that's just my sensibility. So again, I don't I don't know. I think TV is different when it comes to being a female and being a male. But for me, anyone that's ever responded to my writing, it's just been what's on the page. I don't think, and I know that's how I view it too, is if I read a script, it's your writing, it's your voice. It's not whether you're necessarily a male or a female.
Brilliant, thank you. And thinking of the current climate, has there
Yeah.
been any obviously huge challenges right now around the world? Just is the landscape of screenwriting changed at all in light of the pandemic?
It's interesting. I've been fortunate because during the pandemic, I had 2 writing assignments. So, and I remember when the pandemic happened, it was April. I'm like, now what am I going to do? Like, 'cause things were shutting down. And when it first happened, I was like, I know what I'm going to write. I had a book. It was kind of about my family and me. And I'm like, I had started it and didn't finish it because I think I got afraid. I didn't want to keep going. It was too deep. And I picked it up and I started reading it. I'm like, oh, I like this. So I finished it. And actually it's out with, I have an agent, a book agent with it. But that was a direct